Hey everyone, my name is Bronley Plumb, and I'm the founder of RokuCommunity. We're probably best known for the BrightScript extension for VSCode, but we also maintain the BrighterScript compiler, BSLint, and a bunch of other projects. If you're interested in seeing all of our projects, you can go onto our GitHub organization page to see the full list. Today I want to talk about some of the new features we've added in the last year. So we'll start off with some improvements to the VSCode extension. We've added a lot of new UI features. We've added a new file system panel, an app overlays panel. We've added support to split the scene graph inspector panel up into multiple sections, and a ton more stuff there. Then next, I want to talk about BrighterScript. We have been hard at work on the V1 rewrite, and part of that rewrite is adding support for types in standard BrightScript projects. So I think a lot of teams are going to be really excited about this, and I'm excited to share it. Then finally, I want to show you how to build a BrighterScript plugin. I want to talk about some of the power and flexibility that they have, and potentially you could even replace some of your handwritten bash or makefile processes with the BrighterScript plugin. So let's get into it. So first up, let's take a look at some of the new features that we've added to VS Code over the last year. We've added a new Roku file system panel. There's a Roku app overlays panel. A popular request from the community was to be able to split out the scene graph inspector to show the node tree and the details about the selected node at the same time without having to go into a nested view. So we've done that. There are new packaging and signing flows. We've added a button on the device view to generate a screenshot right there, so you don't have to use the web portal anymore for that. There have been improvements made to the device picker, and as a result of our debug protocol testing back last winter, it was a popular request to ask for the debug protocol to support reconnecting rather than having to stop and start the debug protocol every time. So now if you press home on your remote in the middle of a debug session and then open the app again from the home screen, the debug protocol support in VS Code will reconnect to that, and it will feel very seamless, very much more similar to how Telnet works. We've also made a couple of UI design improvements for many of these panels. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these in VS Code. Most of the examples I'll be showing today will be using the sample projects repository from RokuCommunity, which you can get to through our GitHub organization. Specifically, I'll be using the standard with task sample. I've already got that cloned, so let's open that up in VS Code. So the first thing we need to do is we need to open launch.json and set inject RDB device component to true. And then in our main file, right after screen.show, we have to add this comment. And this allows VS Code to inject a component that will run a socket that will allow VS Code to communicate back and forth between VS Code and the app that's running, the side-loaded app. Now, let's go ahead and go to the debug panel, and we're going to start debugging. And I'll just side-load to my Roku stick. And let's open up Roku so you can see that. It's a pretty simple app. What I want to show you first is the Roku file system panel. And you can see all the root level file systems here. You've got temp and package and common and cachefs. And we're not using cachefs for anything. And there's nothing in temp either because we haven't created any files. But you can open up package and see the exact files that were deployed. So I can open up source, main.brs, and this should be pretty similar to the main BRS that we had in our source code, except you'll notice now that we have the RDB on device component right there and injected, and that's how we're able to communicate this. Every time we send a request to get a list of files as we dig down through nested folders, all of these are requests going through this component. So the next item I want to show you is the Roku app overlays panel. So we can open that up, and we're still connected to a debug session. So let's go ahead and add a new overlay. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the safe zone image from Roku. And let's go ahead and take a look at the Roku here. So as you'll see, it's actually uploaded this image to your app. I can toggle it on and off. Let me show you doing that in the VS Code right here. We can toggle this on and off just by clicking this checkbox. You can also adjust the transparency of this image. This makes it really, really nice for working with like UI mockups and stuff. So let's go ahead and add another one. I'm going to turn this one off. And let's add this really, really beautiful mockup that I made for this demo. It's great. So there's the mockup. I'm going to back the transparency off of that. And you can see, you know, it's happening in real time here. Yeah, so this is really, really useful for figuring out how exactly you need to lay out your Roku apps, trying to get it as pixel perfect as possible. So now let's take a look at the Scene Graph Inspector. I'm going to collapse this. And this is showing us a tree view of all of the components in your app. It's really powerful. I think I demoed this last year, but what's new is typically whenever you want to view information about this, you'd click on the node and it takes you into this sub panel, and you got to go back. You know, look at the group and back. And what we've added is this ability to view the details side by side. It's really nice. And then past that, if you click this button, open Scene Graph Inspector in new window, it's actually going to open it in a new tab. Then if you really wanted to put this somewhere else, you can actually do move into new window, and VSCode will allow you to break this panel out into its own independent window. This was added recently to VSCode. There were some limitations in Electron that just had the VSCode team. It took a while to get that implemented, but it's really, really nice. You can put this on a second screen or something and make it as big as you want. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the Roku device view. We can close all this stuff. And we will start a new debug session here. We'll deploy to the streaming stick again. In just a moment, we should see our device view showing us screenshots. It's going to generate them as fast as the device can provide them for us. So it's about, I don't know, one frame per second, maybe even a little bit slower. So what we've added here is a new button called Copy Screenshot. You can click that and it copies it to your clipboard. So now if I paste that, there is a screenshot. I can go down a little bit. I'll take another one. There it is. Another improvement we've added is in the device picker. We had a couple of bugs where sometimes this list would get stale or stuck, so we fixed some issues. So this should be a lot more dependable now. We also tweaked the formatting a little bit so that you have more information in this list. So just know that that is available and it's pretty functional. I didn't used to like using it because it was still a little unstable, but it's been my go-to for picking devices now rather than launching with like an env file or hard coding them in my settings. So another welcome addition is some UI updates that we've added to some of these panels in here. If you've ever encountered RDB not being able to connect, we had a really not the prettiest looking form in here, and this has been updated with some enhancements. I want to talk a little bit about why you need this sometimes. So let's go ahead. If you remember, when we first started this demo, we added the inject RDB on device component setting to true, and we added this comment. So let's go ahead and sideload, but I'm actually going to do debug protocol false. And I'm going to sideload the app, and we'll go ahead and go to my streaming stick again and wait until that launches. Okay, so it's sideloaded. Now I'm going to go ahead and press home. Now I'm going to stop the debug session here. And if you notice in the debug panel, a lot of these are still kind of remembering our last bit of setup. So I'm going to reload VSCode so that way it hasn't cached the credentials of the last time we ran. And here we go. So we got one down here, the REPL. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, on my Roku, I'm going to launch my dev app. Now RTA and RDB are still there because we sideloaded it earlier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter my credentials here. And I'm going to connect. And it works. So if you ever have issues where you're not in the middle of a debug session or VS Code has forgotten your credentials and you just want to test something, this is an option, and now it's prettier. Yay. Then what I want to show you after that is the Roku REPL. This is also a new addition, and what this does is, again, it communicates over the RDB connection that we just connected to, but it will actually let you run arbitrary code whenever the app is running. So let's do return 1 + 1, and we'll run it. And it ran, and there it is. We can do print hello world. And let me go to the output here so you can see that. Actually, we can't see it because we're not connected. So it returned null. So you can do any kind of evaluations you want here. This is actually better when we are connected through a debug session, but you don't need to be, as I've just shown. So let's go ahead and connect, and we will try it again. And then you should start to see my print statements there as well. There we go. Run it again, run it again. There it goes. Yeah, so you can use the debug console down here to do the same things. But this doesn't work unless you're stopped at a breakpoint. So if I run this, it's not stopped at a breakpoint. So you can't actually evaluate. And while this Roku REPL allows you to do these while the app is not stopped at a breakpoint. So they're two different use cases. They serve different purposes, but they're both really powerful. Next, I want to talk about the debug protocol. Last year, around November, December timeframe, we had done a trial run of enabling the debug protocol by default. And we got some feedback from the community. We were missing some features. And one in particular was there seems to be a common workflow where you use VS Code to sideload your app, and then you'll use your remote to close the app, open the app, rather than stopping and starting a debug session. And one of the limitations of the debug protocol implementation in VS Code at the time was basically the moment you pressed home, we shut down. Well, we found a way to automatically reconnect the debug protocol anytime the app relaunches. So I want to walk you through a scenario how this works. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. We're going to turn enable debug protocol back to true. And let's go ahead and sideload the app. There we go. It's running. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the app now. I'm going to use my remote, and I'm going to go open the app again. And you'll notice right here, there's about a 5 or 10 second delay before the application opens. This is actually to our benefit, because what the app is doing is it's waiting for a debug protocol connection. So let's do this again, but this time we're going to leave VS Code running. So I'm going to start a debug session. And we'll monitor the output here. Okay, the app is up. I'm going to press home on my remote, but I'm not going to stop the debug session this time. Now I'm going to navigate over and launch the app again, and this time it runs right away. And you'll notice we reconnected. So this gives almost the exact same behavior as Telnet. Now behind the scenes, the debug protocol has actually shut down, and we're monitoring an active Telnet connection to see if the debug protocol wants to connect again. So while the implementation under the hood is different, this is essentially delivered the same functionality. So hopefully this will be yet another motivation for you to use the debug protocol more regularly. We think it's definitely the future of debugging on the platform, and we're really excited to have landed this feature. So next up, I want to show you some commands you can use to create packages and rekey your device. These have been highly requested for developers as they are used to this from the old Eclipse plugin, and we haven't typically had support for them. So you can see those in the command palette here, Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P if you're on Mac. And then you've got Create Package, and then you've also got Rekey Device and Create Package, and we've also got Rekey Device. So let's start off with Create Package, but before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and generate a new developer key. All right, so let's go ahead and copy that, just so we have it around. So this is my password. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose Create Package, Control-Shift-P, and then Create Package. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick a folder because my application doesn't have any weird structure. And I'm going to go ahead and just choose the root of this project. Then I'm going to use my Roku stick that we've been using for all these demos. And then here's my developer password, or and here's the signing password that we just generated. Now we're going to be able to review this to make sure everything looks right. Yep, that all looks good. All right, we're going to go ahead and create the package. It's done. So now let's go ahead and view it. And here it is. There's the zip that it used at one point, and now here's the package. I'm going to go ahead and drag this package into this folder so it's easier to find. Next, I'm going to go ahead and rekey the device, which you'll need sometimes if you're switching between different clients. If your signing key has changed, or there's a bunch of reasons for this, but rekey device. And then I'm going to manually do this information. And then this is the password again. This is the signing password, which should still be in my clipboard. And now we're going to pick this package that we had already created in the last step. There it is. Now we're going to review all the information again and rekey. And there we go. Successfully rekeyed. So now you don't have to make a custom script. You don't have to do it through any terminals or the web portal. We have this kind of baked in. Now there are other options here. I'm not going to go into them too much. But you can choose from a launch JSON or a Roku deploy.json if you're familiar with those tools. Same thing with rekey. You can enter from a JSON file or manually. So you can keep some of this configuration information in there if you're comfortable having those committed to your repo, or you can store them elsewhere. And that's about it for the features that I wanted to cover today that are included in the production version of the VSCode BrightScript language extension. There are a few additional things I wanted to mention before we move on to our next topic, though. The first is BrighterScript is both a compiler and a superset language above BrightScript, but it's also the language server that powers all of the editor features that you see. So anytime you're doing completions, all of these are coming from BrighterScript. And we have noticed over time that we have some significant performance issues in this language server. So I started a complete rewrite of the language server back, I think, over a year ago at this point. And it's a lot of work. I mean, I have a ton of changes in there. And because this touches so much of the editor experience, we're not comfortable releasing it until we know that it's stable. That said, we would really appreciate if there are people who are willing to give it a test drive. And there's a couple ways you can do that. The first is we have added some automations into our GitHub flows that anytime we make changes to a branch, this bot will generate a new temporary package. So for those of you that are using BrighterScript or are comfortable with NPM, we'd love it if you could take a moment and install the latest version of BrighterScript and then change your extension settings to point to this one. I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you go in here, and we're going to do npm install that link. That's going to run just for a moment and install that. It's just about done. Now that it's installed, what we're going to do is down here at the bottom right. Oh, can you see that? I'm going to move my screen a little bit here. Down here at the bottom right, there is a language server picker. And so I'm going to click that, and that's going to bring up this drop down at the top. And we're going to choose Change Selected BrighterScript Version. And then the two primary options you have are use the one that's included with VSCode, or you can use the version that we found in the workspace. So because we ran npm install, that version is available locally in the node modules folder. So I'm going to choose that. Now what that's done is it's actually changed a setting in your VS Code settings. And you see how it pointed the BrighterScript BSDK to the local copy of BrighterScript that came from node modules. And you'll also be able to tell it's running that version because of the version number down here in the bottom. And so now this is actually using the new language server. And for a small app like this, you're not going to notice a big difference. The performance is about the same. But for larger apps, we fixed a lot of issues in our file change pipeline that have caused it to slow down. We've added some functionality where it will actually stop a existing validation whenever we detect changes, so that way we don't have these stacked up long-running validations that have to wait. We also have moved validation into background threads, which means we should be able to validate multiple projects at the same time instead of running them sequentially. So overall, we found it to be significantly more stable, but there are a couple of bugs and edge cases that we're encountering occasionally. So if you have time to test it, that would be great. So in addition to this, you may have noticed that I'm running a pre-release version of VS Code up here. And there was another option in this list called install from NPM. This is new. I'm still actively working on this. This is not available in the production version of VS Code BrightScript Language yet. But the idea will be that eventually you won't even need to do the NPM install step. You should be able to choose install from NPM. It's going to go through and pull every single NPM version that's available, including the alpha versions. And we can go ahead and choose any one of them that we want. So let's go ahead and choose 1.0 alpha 36. And that is going to install this version for you into a temporary folder that is managed by the VS Code extension. That means that if all you want to do is change VS Code, which version of BrighterScript is used in VS Code, you no longer need a package.json. You no longer need to install BrighterScript. You can actually bounce between all the different versions and it will all happen seamlessly. And now, what you'll also notice is that it has changed this BSDK to an NPM package number that represents where it came from NPM. So as developers open your projects, they no longer need to run NPM install because our extension will do it for them. So hopefully this will open up the doors for much easier testing of BrighterScript versions, as well as potentially allowing you to reduce some of the friction that comes with having to install every time you change your BrightScript version or BrighterScript version. And I think that leads us nicely into our next topic, which is BrighterScript type validation. So, like I mentioned earlier, BrighterScript is a language server, as well as a validator, as well as a compiler transpiler. And all of the features that you see in your editor with the VS Code BrightScript language extension are powered by the BrighterScript language server. Even if you're not using any BrighterScript, it is still powered by the same engine. And over the last year, we have been working on a significant upgrade to BrighterScript, which we're calling the version 1 release. It's been in a pre-release for many years now, and we feel like we have a significant amount of stability and upgradable features at this point that it deserves a version 1 release. So, I already mentioned some of this stuff last year, and I want to talk about some of the new features that have been added since our last developer conference discussion. But specifically, I want to call out that we've made a significant improvement to the type tracking for BrightScript projects. And I want to show you that. I'm really excited about it. But we've also added better conditional compile validations. Previously, conditional compiles were actually removed during a pre-process step, and now they are included in the AST the whole time, which was a much asked for feature. We've improved the validation performance significantly by reducing the number of scopes we have to check. We've added type checking for all native components and objects. We support overloaded methods from the Roku docs. We also will now show deprecated items in the editor as strike-through, which are driven by the Roku docs, as well as the @deprecated annotation in your documentation comments. We've added improved hover and completion information. There were a lot of situations in the past where your hovers just wouldn't know enough information or they'd be wrong. And we have a lot more improvements for BrighterScript projects specifically. So let's go ahead and jump in. I have a lot to show you here. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this first topic. For years now, we've been trying to find ways to improve the experience for type tracking and type validation and editor experiences for standard BrightScript projects. And we've mostly been limited by the fact that we can't add new syntax to the language. But we've found some ways to work around that, and I'm really, really excited to show that to you. So let's look at an example. So let's add a function that creates a rectangle. Now, historically, you're kind of limited in what you can say this thing returns. You know, you can do as object, which, I mean, it tells you it's not a primitive, but that's not overly helpful. It definitely doesn't tell you that it's some kind of node. Or you have as dynamic, which is also the default. So it's not overly helpful. You don't really know what it's returning. So we have added the ability to add return types into the doc block comments. So here's at return row SG node rectangle. And check this out. Now it knows that it's a rectangle. We have added support in the BrighterScript type system for all of the native types, all of the components, all of the scene graph nodes, anything you can call a create object, all of the global functions. They're all available now in this type system. So all of the nodes will start with row SG node rectangle, but all the other items will just have their standard name from create object. So check this out. It now knows it's row SG node rectangle. Let's go ahead and create a rectangle. And there it is. There's a rectangle. Now let's try. There are all of the fields, all of the properties, all the functions that are available on rectangle. Now, what if we wanted to, potentially augment this rectangle? Maybe this function adds another field to it. So in that situation, you can always cast it back to dynamic. So rectangle dot some not there prop. You're going to get a diagnostic saying you can't. There's nothing there with that name. And if you know what you're doing, if you're like, no, just trust me, it's fine. You can use the at type comment and say this is dynamic. Or if you have some more specific component, you could always say it's my custom component. So here's a good example. We've got list item right here. List item is a component. So that is also available. Let's say this creates a list item instead. Row SG node list item. And right off the bat, it's detecting that these types are not compatible. So let's do list item. And now what's a property that is on list item? It has a field called item content, focus percent, max label width. So let's check one of those. So let's call this item. And then we're still casting as dynamic, so I can do anything I want here. So let's take that away. And then there are some of the properties that we have defined. Focus percent, item content, max label width, they are all right there. And that's actually not a float, so let's fix that. This is really powerful. So you can use the at type annotation to change anything in an assignment right here, like this. Maybe it's a string. It's not. It's a label. You know that. So list item. You can use the at return, but there's another one. You can actually also do parameters. So let's say incoming node. And we'll do at param incoming node. Nope, I had that backwards. This will be the type, row SG node. And we'll call it label incoming node. So now we also know that incoming node is a label. So this allows you to get type safety within your functions as well. Here are all the properties available on that label. So I hope this is exciting to you because I think this is incredibly exciting. We have taken standard BrightScript projects that don't really know much about their type systems, because we can't. It's just dynamic stuff everywhere. And we have added a significant amount of confidence in these projects. So I'm excited. I hope you are. But we can move on to the next couple of examples here. So let's go ahead and make a new BrighterScript file. I'll call it lib.bs, function test, p1, and function. And I mentioned earlier that we had support for all of the native components and items. So let's take a look at some of those as I'll type row to get the completions. And you see here we have row app info, row channel store, all of the components that you can create are right here. Now let's do row SG node. And you can now see all of the node components that are in here. Every single row SG node that you can create that we're aware of through the documentation is in this list. Also, if you make your own components, they are automatically added as row SG node, your name of your component. So we can look for row SG node list item, which is one of our custom components. It's just defined right here. So that's really powerful because not only do you get full support for all of the native items, you also get your own components in this list. And like I showed earlier with our comments, these are also going to be able to give you completions on the properties that you've added. So focus percent, max label width, which we saw in here. Oh, and we've also included documentation about each of these properties. So if I hover over add field, there's the description of that method. Let's check another one. Do like insert child or ID or render tracking. So we're hoping that this improves the development experience by eliminating the need to have 10, 15, 20 different Roku documentation pages open at any given time, because a lot of this information is now going to be available to you inside of your editor. We've also fixed a few bugs related to function overloading. Now, we can't do this natively in BrightScript or BrighterScript, but the Roku documentation has a few examples of how one function, like set destination rect, actually takes a rectangle as an object, or it takes 4 integer arguments. And so we've fixed the documentation in our code to be able to support both of those types. Historically, when you were to do something like this, it would only ever support the integer type or the object type, but not both. And so now we have created kind of a unified signature. One day I hope to support something more like the way that TypeScript does it, where it actually gives you multiple signatures that you can step through. But for now, this will allow your code to be validated properly based on the arguments you're passing into this function. So another thing that we've added is support for deprecation visualization. A great example of that is the row URL transfer object has a function called setPort. It's not really documented anywhere on the Roku documentation, but it's there. We've found some legacy code that actually supports this, but it's not really recommended. So for several of the items marked deprecated from the Roku docs, we've now added this nice strike through display. Eventually, I want to get to the point that you could add your own deprecation comments in the doc blocks above functions, like this. And then when you call them, it will tell you that it's deprecated. But right now, it's not doing that. We don't have the functionality tapped in yet, but we've got the framework in place, so it should support that whenever we get the time to implement it. So another really neat feature that we've added this year is the ability to define what your local M variable is. So let's go ahead and declare an interface. We'll call it local M. And you could probably come up with better names. Like if we're doing this in list item, this could be like list item M. But so this local M has a property called label1. Now, when I do m.label1, I'm not getting any completions here. There it is. But if we use this new typecast statement, typecast M as local M, now m.label1 is available, and it's the only property that's available, which is by design. Because if you're going to tell us exactly what type your M is, you need to be in full control over what properties are available there. So you'll notice you don't even have the associative array information here, which you're going to need to add by doing extends row associative array if that's what you want to also have your M support, which it is a row associative array, but there may be situations where you don't want to allow your team to just willy-nilly add properties to M that you need to explicitly declare them on the interface first. So then we'll say like name as string, and now I can do m.name. So this is going to be really powerful for your teams to enforce what you actually want to support on M. But just know that it comes with a little bit of restriction that's intentional. Now, you may have noticed that we've added typecast M inside of the function body, but you can actually do this at a higher level as well. So let's go ahead and add another function, test2, and function, and print m dot and it just looks like a standard row associative array at this point. There's no name property. Let's go ahead and lift this typecast statement to the top of the file. And now M has the type that we have told it from the typecast. This also works inside of namespace bodies. It's there. Or if you wanted to restrict the M type to just namespace bodies, now you will see that it's not available there. So there's a lot of flexibility here. It'll work for cascading namespaces as well. You know, if you want to have a namespace beta inside of this, it's kind of scoped to whatever block you've got, whether it's function or namespace or top of the file. So it's really powerful to allow you to kind of customize M according to your needs. Most likely, you're just going to add it at the top of your file. And one more thing to note, this is file specific. So this will not declare M across your entire scope. So let's go ahead and change this to BS and take a quick look at that. Notice that this is not inheriting the M from the other file. And that was intentional as well, because you may have files that are included in multiple scopes, and so you wanted to make sure that their M's don't kind of leak into other files in the same scope. Let's go back to lib. We can get rid of some of this code. So next up, I want to show you an improvement we made to the import completions. Now, historically, we've had issues where our import statements would include the BRS file extensions, even when you're trying to import BS files. So I'm going to go import pkg. I'm going to close that. And if you see here, lib.bs is now .bs instead of BRS, which is really helpful, because before you'd end up picking the wrong one. For whatever reason, the absolute imports just had the wrong extension, but we've fixed that. So then another feature we've added, let's go ahead and clean some of this code up. It's something called an alias statement. Now let me get some code here to show you what I mean. So let's say we've got a namespace called test with a function called isString. And then we've got another namespace called alpha with a really good name called test. We really like this name test inside of alpha, but that also means that it conflicts with the outer namespace called test. So what BrightScript has decided to do is it says we're going to use the closest name of test that we can. So if we had another function here, you know, do something else, and then we want to call test, this test is going to reference the one from alpha, which makes sense. But what if we wanted to actually call test.isString? Well, we haven't had the ability to do that prior to this, this change I'm about to show you. So what you can do is at the very top of this file, you can do alias test namespace equals test. So this is the name you give it, and then this is the thing you wanted to alias. So now inside of alpha, we can do test namespace, and check that out. Now it knows what it is, and oh, we need one argument. So let's pass in a number. This is really powerful because you can use aliases to point to test, to namespaces. You can point to functions. Like you could do alias isString2 equals test.isString. And that will now reference that function. So you could do it like this instead. You can point to enums, classes, interface. It basically represents a type from anywhere. And so now you can choose to use whatever names you want in your namespaces and know that you can alias items that may end up getting shadowed. All right, so let's go ahead and remove all of this stuff. And we'll put back our test function. So another feature that we've added, this has been a popular request for those who like to use conditional compile. Historically, our BrighterScript parser came from an earlier version of the parser that ran a preprocessor to eliminate the false branches of these conditional compile statements before they ever made it to the parser. Which means when you run your code through the BrighterScript parser right now and then transpile it, your conditional compile code is actually missing. All you would end up with when you transpile this is the print true. So in BrightScript v1, we have now finally added proper AST support for conditional compile code. That means that the code that you input will be the code that you get out. So let me go ahead and I can show you this, preview the transpiled code to the side, and there it is. There is the actual transpiled code. So what this means is you can write plugins now for BrighterScript that look for conditional compile code. You can validate your true branch, your false branch. You also can rest assured knowing that the output will be identical. So if you wanted to flip a manifest BSConst flag later on with the already transpiled code, you can do that. So I just want to talk about a couple other things. I don't have any more code examples to show, but I wanted to bring up that we have significantly improved the validation flows for BrighterScript v1. Now, the way that the BrighterScript validation cycle worked in the past was we basically had to validate every single scope. So if you've got 15 XML components, we're going to validate 16 times. We're going to validate the source scope and every one of those components and all of the files that they're imported. But that led to a lot of duplication in terms of the effort that went into validating scopes. So we've kind of flipped that entire concept on its head. So now what we do is we actually build out a list of symbols that are used across scopes, and we figure out what items those files or functions reference, so we can validate a file within the context of one scope, and then only all of the other unique scopes that result in the types being significantly different. So what this ends up doing in a language server environment is when you're typing in a file, you're typically only validating one scope now, even though that file might be used in 10 or 15 different scopes. So it significantly reduced the amount of time that it takes to type and validate and wait to see your diagnostics again. This is really, really nice. I've been wanting to get to this for a while, and we finally found the time to get to it. So big thanks to Mark for spending all of the work and grueling amount of effort it took to build out this validation. So then, the last thing I want to bring up is that we keep a pretty detailed change log of all of the changes. So if you're interested in seeing more of the changes that have gone into the BrighterScript v1 rewrite, you can check that out here. You just go to the release 1.0.0 branch and look down through. This is basically every change we've made, and there is a ton of them. A lot of these are under the hood changes. We have improved a lot of the way that you interact with BrighterScript through the AST, through the plugin system, to try to make it more stable as we head towards the v1 release. We don't want to break your plugins when we find out that we have yet another breaking change that we would need to add. So we're trying to get all the breaking changes in at one time. And you can kind of keep track of this release if you go into, let's see here. Let's grab this one as an example. We have a milestone that we're using to track all of these items, and we've already done 253 items. We only have a few left. I may find a few more as we get closer to the release, but just be aware all of this information is there. It's out in the open. We would love it if you would be willing to test the v1 version of BrighterScript, which you can do at any point just by doing npm install BrighterScript at next. And that will bring down the very latest version of BrighterScript. And then, like I've shown in other examples, you can change which version of BrighterScript you're using inside the settings.json. So my third topic today is on BrighterScript plugins. I want to start by saying that this is not going to be an in-depth demo of how to write BrighterScript plugins. My goal is more to show you some of the capabilities of the plugin system and hopefully give you some ideas for how they could be useful in your own projects. But they can get pretty complicated depending on what you're looking to do, so that's a bit out of scope for today's demo. The first question I want to answer, though, is why would you want to write a BrighterScript plugin? Especially if you're not currently using BrighterScript as a part of your build process or toolchain, it may seem a little counterintuitive. So to answer that, I first want to mention that BrighterScript can be used to validate standard BrightScript projects. Many teams will use BrighterScript as part of their continuous integration CI/CD processes to block pull requests that have syntax or logical issues. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at an example of how this could be useful. I'm going to go ahead and open up this same old standard project, and let's have a function here, test. And now let's call test from our main function. But let's pass in a parameter. Well, BrighterScript understands that the test function does not take any parameters, does not take any arguments, but we're passing one in. And you'll notice this is not a BrighterScript project, this is a standard BrightScript project. So let me go ahead and save this, and I'm going to go ahead and install BrighterScript. And then once it's installed, I'm going to run BrighterScript from the command line. npx bsc. And check that out. It validated your project and found this error. So again, just to be clear, this is not a BrighterScript project. This is a standard Roku app, no BrighterScript, no compiler or transpiler needed. This is what you would exactly zip up and ship to your Rokus. So what's nice is you can use the BrighterScript compiler to validate your apps, to check for syntax issues, to check for parameter issues. Like there's a whole suite of things that you can do with this compiler without needing to actually have a build process. So with that in mind, what if you wanted to add more validations? That's where the plugin system comes in. And I'd like to first show that BSLint is a plugin written and maintained by RokuCommunity. It's a BrightScript plugin, and it has a whole suite of rules. There's a whole list of rules here. You can check it out if you want. One fun fact about this, Roku has recently contributed a few pull requests to BSLint. So thank you so much to the team over there. It was great collaborating. I think we've got more on the way. But it's exciting to see that these tools are getting value outside of just a few of us here at RokuCommunity. So BSLint is a BrightScript plugin, but you can write your own. So let's go ahead and make our own small BrightScript plugin. Now, we can go and grab this BSC plugin template, which is one that we maintain here at RokuCommunity. You could write one from scratch, but a lot of the time this does what you need. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we can run it in here. And I like to make a couple of changes. I prefer to have my package JSON at the root of my project. And let's go ahead and install the latest version of BrighterScript. Okay, so then next what we need to do is we need to add a couple options to our BS config, which we're going to put right here. So the first one is a path to a list of plugins. So in this case, we have one plugin, and we're referencing the script directly. You can also use node modules, so like you could do RokuCommunity BSLint if you wanted to. But in this case, we're just going to be using the local plugin. And then because my plugin is written in TypeScript and I don't want to have to run a transpile step after every change, I'm going to be using tsnode, which just on the fly transpiles our TypeScript code. So plugins can tap into various lifecycle events. There are a whole suite of them, which you can see in the documentation here. I'm not going to get into it too much. We're mostly going to focus on validation. But there's a list of them out here, and you can also see them directly in the source code. So let's go ahead and look at plugin.ts, and you can see the entire list of lifecycle hooks that are available to you. So in this situation, I think it would be neat to add a rule that prevents any uppercase characters in comments. It's kind of silly, but it's a nice, easy way to show the power of the plugin system. So here is that plugin. I will explain what it does. So before file validate fires for every single file in your program, XML files, BRS files, etc. So we want to make sure we're only looking at BRS files at the moment. And then once we know that we have a BRS file, we want to look through the entire AST, and anytime we see a comment, we want to iterate over them and make sure that there are no uppercase letters. And then if we find one, we'll add a diagnostic, which will then force the developer to fix this issue. So let's go ahead, and there's a command down here, restart language server. So you can do that by clicking on the BrighterScript version at the bottom, or you can do it directly, restart, by opening the command palette, restart language server. We're going to do that. And then you'll notice that it's going to run the plugin, and all of a sudden we have more diagnostics. And you can ignore these ESLint errors. That's not a big deal. So this doesn't like having uppercase letters. So for now, let's just go ahead and transform all of these to lowercase. Almost there. Just, oh, that one's already a bug. Yep, we know that. Let's fix that. So let's do another one. Let's enforce that all functions start with an uppercase character. So go back into our plugin, and we're going to add another entry into this walk. So right here, comma. Now this one says anytime we find a function statement and that function statement's name does not start with an uppercase character, or actually if it starts with a lowercase character, add another diagnostic. So let's save that, and we will restart the language server again, and we will see what happens now. And there we go. We found a function called uppercase main in main.brs. So as you can see, you've got the full power of the BrighterScript parser and AST and lifecycle at your disposal. This is way more powerful than needing to write regular expression scrapers and scanners that process your code, because you can get really, really specific down to the specific type of statement, the specific part of that statement, name or parameter names. Like the entire AST is available. So we've created a plugin to do validation, but if you're willing to use BrighterScript as a compiler, you can also add more functionality to the transpiling flows. So these are going to require that you use the transpiler. But let's just do a simple one where we're going to remove every comment in the app when we transpile. This is sometimes good for, obfuscation or just to reduce the package size a little bit. And all these manipulations are done against the current AST. So it's important that you use a specific pattern that I'm going to show you here. All right, so we've got this event before file transpile. I'm going to go ahead and replace the existing one because that was just there as an example from the template. So again, if we have a BRS file, walk every single node in the AST tree. If we find a comment, remove the comment by this object and key. So this is essentially going to eliminate every comment from the output. All right, so let's go ahead and run the transpiler. So npx bsc. And it transpiled. And actually, I think I forgot one setting. Let's look at my BS config. Yes, I need one more setting. Retain staging juror. We need to keep that. So let's run this one more time. All right. So now let's go in and we look at our main file. We have this comment right here. Let's see if it's there. We're going to go out, staging, main.brs, and that comment is gone. Are there any other comments in our app? Let's take a look. Here's a bunch of comments in get subreddit. So let's go out to our output folder. And we're under tasks, get subreddit, and all of the comments are gone. So like I said about validation, this is incredibly powerful. You can rename functions, you can rename function calls, you can eliminate strings, you can manipulate strings, you can do a lot of stuff. And so a couple other good examples is something like handlebars. Like you may want to load values from a configuration file and then go through and replace all instances inside of strings with some config value. So you could write a plugin that would go through and find these and then replace them with a value from your configuration. It's really powerful, and we have found that it is a lot more stable than doing regular expression search and finds. And plus you get the added benefit of the validation in your editor. So like I mentioned earlier, bslint is a BrighterScript plugin, and you can take a look at the source code if you wanted to see exactly how it was implemented. If I go in here and I go to index, you can see there's a couple different plugins. There's a plugin factory. But in addition to bslint, there are also a bunch of other plugins out there. So one that we just recently released, and I'm happy to announce, is a plugin called Auto Find Node. And what this does is it scans every XML file at compile time, and it finds every element that has an ID in it. And then it finds the init function for that component, and it adds m.elementID equals m.top.find node element ID. So this has been really nice for some of our internal projects where you no longer need to do all of this boilerplate code to pull out all of the components that you're looking for. This is written with a BrighterScript plugin. And again, it's all open source. So you can come in and take a look at the plugin and see how that was implemented. In addition to that, many of you are probably familiar with the Rooibush unit testing framework. This is a BrighterScript plugin, as well as the Maestro framework that was written as a BrighterScript plugin. So hopefully it's clear at this point that BrighterScript plugins can be really useful. They might be worth trying out in your own projects just to see what benefits it can provide for your workflows. Just keep in mind that your project does not need to be a BrighterScript project in order to benefit from writing these plugins. Like I've shown earlier, you can use validation without needing a transpile step to make sure that your coding standards are being enforced. So, to wrap things up, I just want to give a big shout out to Brian Leidy, who wrote most of the new VSCode panels that we saw at the start of this presentation. Mark Pierce, who's been the primary developer on the version 1 upgrades to BrighterScript, and of course, all of our amazing contributors from the Roku community. And on that note, I'd like to briefly mention that we need your help. There is a huge backlog of issues and feature requests, and as this community grows, we're having trouble keeping up with everything. There are only a few consistent contributors, and while we greatly appreciate all their help, there's still a lot more to do that we just can't get to. So if you're interested in contributing, please check out our website at RokuCommunity.github.io, or you can reach out to us on the Roku Community Slack. You can contact me personally. My name is Bronley Plumb. So I hope you've learned something new about these awesome Roku Community tools, and hopefully you'll find them useful. So, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into questions. So the first question is, so we've got from Lucas. The device view doesn't seem to show real-time view for me and is quite laggy. Any advice on how to get it to run more smoothly?
I can speak to that one. The device view right now is powered by taking screenshots against the device regularly. And so we are feeding that device view as fast as we can based on how fast the Roku device can provide those screenshots to us. So if Roku makes it faster, it can go faster. There could be some options maybe for reducing their file size or optimizing that pipeline. Unfortunately, past that, our current mechanisms won't go any faster. But I did want to point out one additional thing. I have an unfinished pull request sitting out on the VSCode repository that will let us feed an FFmpeg feed into it. So if you have like a USB capture card or something, and we can land that feature, that would be an option for having your live views directly from a plugged-in Roku directly in VSCode.
Okay, awesome. All right, next question. How to debug extension timeout errors properly in Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, I can try and take this one. This one's a little bit tricky. Execution timeouts in general are very often quite disconnected from the area in which they actually crash. One thing you can attempt to do, however, depending on the situation, is in VS Code, when you encounter one of these crashes, you can use something like the call stack in the debug panel, which shows you the full execution of the different functions that led you to that current break. If you're running the debug protocol, you can also easily walk up that call stack and inspect different variables at different points in that call chain. In addition to that, the debugger also provides an overview of all the active threads on the device at that point. So you can take a look there and see if you've got maybe too many threads running at a given time. There are limits to how many the device can handle. But outside of that, it can be quite tricky to debug execution timeouts overall, just due to their very nature.
Okay, awesome. Next question. What is the scope of Roku REPL? Is it more for just general BrightScript code, or can we do anything specific to our channel's code base?
Yeah, so the Roku REPL, the way that it works under the hood is we upload a component library with just that code in it. So it kind of executes in its own component context. So you can do all sorts of stuff in your own channel's code base from that, but it has to be accessible as if it was one component talking to another component. Like you could reach up to the top of the scene and then dig down in and find another node under there. But just understand that's how it's implemented under the hood. It's through a component that's like on the fly compiled.
Okay. All right. Next question. Instead of the annotations, can we not incorporate the suggested fields if we declare the type in the function signature?
Yeah, so for this one, I believe you're talking about the comments that give the type annotations above code. And the reason those annotations exist is when you're writing standard BrightScript code. If you have BrighterScript code, you can put those annotations, those types anywhere you want. But for standard BrightScript projects, that's a syntax error or a compile error because those types don't exist in the Roku compiler. That is an abstraction layer above in the BrighterScript project. And BrighterScript is a community maintained project with no direct affiliation with Roku. So if Roku wants to add all those types into their language, then it would work. But otherwise, you're going to need to use the comments or put it in the use BrighterScript and then transpile your project to eliminate those types.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. I noticed a lot of these updates, like alias, are demoed on BrighterScript code. Will some of these be added to BrightScript too? And I feel like maybe I ought to answer this question. So I can share that we are making BrightScript language improvements this next year. We can't speak to any roadmaps or any forward-facing comments, but we can say that we are making investments into BrightScript, and we are open to hearing what parts of BrighterScript should be added to the BrightScript core language. So I think that's a fair answer. I think that's fair and accurate, without making any forward-facing comments. Okay, so next question. What does the future of BrighterScript hold? Will support for it ever be discontinued, considering BrightScript is still the officially recommended language for Roku development?
Chris, you want to take this one?
So the way that I would take this one is that BrighterScript itself would only really truly ever go away if all of the features that we built towards it end up in BrightScript. And that's kind of in Roku's hands to handle. The only other alternative is if, and this is not a commitment of any type, is if Roku were to change technologies. Then obviously the tools that we built would not likely be transferable, but we would potentially explore that as well. But as far as we're concerned, we have no intentions to go anywhere. We intend to support this for as long as we are around. And even if we did go away or stop supporting it, the tools themselves will always remain accessible for either you to pick up and maintain on your own, fork, or access via NPM registries that will never be taken down.
Okay. Awesome. Next question. If we consider adopting BrighterScript, what are some of the most common issues we will see in that adoption?
Okay, so I can think of a couple, and then I'll have Chris chime in because he's going to know way more about this because he actually writes Roku code. Whereas I just hang out in TypeScript land all the time. One of the biggest challenges in adopting BrighterScript is going to be the fact that your source code and your compiled code have different line numbers. Now, we've solved this by the concept called source maps. It's really popular in web development environments, but and the VS Code extension also supports reading source maps. So if you're using the BrighterScript transpiler, it will produce the output code and source maps so that when you're debugging, it will line everything back up when you're stepping through your code. But your crash reports from Roku will have the compiled codes line numbers, and you're going to have to understand how to translate those back. We've got a few tools floating around that will do some of that translation for you. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but we have one on our organization website. Or just, download that version of the code, transpile again, and look at the output lines if it's not intuitive. Chris, can you think of some other challenges?
Yeah, one thing I want to expand on with that one, being that this is something I do deal with, the application that we work on is a pure BrighterScript project. A very simple way that we do this is we just check out the given release that we publish that we receive crashes for, and we use the preview transpile code feature in VS Code to then look at what BrighterScript produced, match it to the line number in the transpiled output, and it will show me in my original source code what actual line of code that was. For anybody who's worried about that, our modifications are not extremely dramatic most of the time. Our most dramatic modification right now is mostly that we will take things like associative arrays or arrays and expand them to be multi-line. Outside of that, there is not a crazy drastic shift in what you write versus what we actually ship to the device.
Yeah, maybe the classes are another one that they've turned
Yeah,
out to be a little
classes are
bit,
a
but
little bit more. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
content of your classes, like the methods aren't that much different, but their line numbers have moved.
Yeah. The other most common sticking point that most people have when they try BrightScript for the first time is they will tend to see this is actually a problem even if you're just using the language server outside of BrightScript is uh, if you do a lot of individual files that you don't import everywhere, but you have different functions in your components with code paths that you as an engineer know you're not going to hit, so you don't import that file in a given component, you will get errors in your code. This applies really to both. So you'll see this in VS Code today in a normal project, but that's probably the one biggest hurdle that people have when they experience this tool set for the first time. But we're more than happy to help with that issue and kind of explain why you're seeing these issues and help you solve them.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Can we include both BS, so the file extension BS and BRS files in my current Roku project?
Yes, we have designed BrighterScript from the ground up to be incrementally upgradable. So any file with a BRS file extension, by default, you're not allowed to use BrighterScript features in there. If you add a class or an import or a namespace, you will get syntax errors saying you're not allowed to do this. And then you can add one BS file into your project, and that one will have all the capabilities of BrighterScript. But just keep in mind that you're gonna have to run the transpiler the moment you add one BrighterScript file to your project. So your toolchain, your build process will need to be upgraded the moment you start incorporating BrighterScript. But you can incrementally upgrade files as you find time and downtime in between sprints, etc. Oh, one more thing on that. If you really just don't want to change the file extensions, but you want to integrate BrighterScript functionality, we also have a compiler flag in your BS config that says BRS, BS, I don't care, everything is BrighterScript, and that will allow you to maintain some of maybe your Git history if you didn't want to do file renames and such. But we recommend just switching the file extension, just it's a little bit more clear to developers when they come and encounter those.
Okay. Next question. Any community tools for performance profiling? Yeah. So I would, Sam that asked this question, definitely encourage you to go back when we upload the videos and check out the developers panel, the developer tools panel that we had earlier this morning. That will share lots of information about performance profiling and analytics. And that is a tool that our Roku team works on.
I
So,
did have one quick thought on that. We don't have any tools at the moment, but we recently discovered that there's a get microseconds function on the row date time. So some of us have been dreaming about writing our own code that just instruments every single function to get our own profiling results, but that is going to be significantly worse than something Roku provides. So, maybe we'll have a race or something. I don't know. But if you're interested in working on that, I have lots of ideas, so reach out to me.
okay. All right, next question. Will we ever see integration of the Visual Studio Code extension and Roku Resource Monitor? This is probably a question that I will take, and basically what I will share is that I will take this question and as a piece of feedback and share it with our team that presented on the DevTools panel earlier this morning, and let them know that there is an interest in integrating these two things. All right, next question. First of all, thanks so much for all your work and great presentation. Have you thought of doing a walkthrough guide for BrighterScript for companies and teams that want to add BrighterScript?
Yeah, all the time. The challenge is that I think the only full-time developer working on these Roku tools. It was my hobby for years until Fubo graciously brought me on full-time to work on it. We just don't have enough time for this. And I have to balance documentation over guides, over actual functionality. And right now, most of the time, it's just going to come down to functionality. So I am happy to provide some vision or guidance on maybe some of the ways we as the community would want to add some of these guides. Again, I've got a ton of ideas in that area, but I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So I would love to see a ton of this. Um, I will say that I believe it was last year's presentation. I actually do a quick walkthrough of how to upgrade a BrightScript project to BrighterScript. So you can check that out. It's either last year or 2 years ago. It's only like 10 minutes, so there's a lot more we could cover. But you can at least go there to start. And if anybody's interested in helping, let me know.
Yeah, I wanna add as well. We have had a couple of people come in and out of the community and post some. One of them was here this conference. Arturo has some good blogs and stuff that he's been doing on how to get started with Roku development, and some of those do cross into BrighterScript areas. So definitely take a look at some of the blog posts and stuff that he has posted.
Okay, awesome. All right, and we've got a few more questions and a few more minutes. Question from Samuel: how would one get on board with creating a plugin?
So I think the demo that I gave today was actually a fairly decent first start on how to do that. We have a BrighterScript. I think I even cloned it in the demo. There's a starter project for creating a plugin. That's the place to start. And then you can also look through the BrighterScript source code because we use a plugin internally for a lot of our functionality. So those are the two places that I would start. We have a little bit of information in the documentation. Again, it's not great. I wish we had more time to update it. And you can always reach out to me directly. I'm happy to sit down with you for an hour or so and talk through strategies on what you want to accomplish. I'm really passionate about this stuff, so like, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly on the Roku Community Slack or ask on one of our GitHub projects. You'll find me. I monitor those quite regularly.
Also, keep in mind that the tools that we demoed today, such as the auto find node plugin and BSLint, are open source and the code is fully accessible.
Right, and those are BrighterScript plugins as well. Yeah, good call.
Okay. So next question. Debugging has always been interesting in Roku development. Any thoughts on how BrighterScript could help there?
From my perspective, maybe Bronley has something to add to this. The main benefit that I have personally gotten by using BrighterScript is mostly just that my code generally is clearer and more understandable. And again, to what we talked about earlier, the output of transpiling is not drastically different from what you've had. It mostly provides quite a few ways to help you organize your code a little bit better, namespace your code, things like that. That's probably been my biggest benefit, is my code is more organized, more understandable using it than without it.
Yeah, and I would add on to that we are adding a lot of validation and syntax checking in BrighterScript to catch things at compile time. Whether you like ahead of time compiled languages or not, there is a clear benefit to catching errors before you run the code. So with BrighterScript v0 that's out right now, we catch a whole pile of issues like, you're missing parentheses or wrong number of arguments, or you didn't import this script, or I can't find that function. All of those are typically things you wouldn't find out until you ran that code on device. So by using the BrighterScript language server, not even in BrighterScript, but even just BrightScript, you're going to catch a lot of problems before they happen, which reduces the amount of time you actually have to debug in the first place. And then with the V1 release that's coming sometime when we get it all done, we have a significant amount more type tracking and validation to catch more of these problems ahead of time.
Okay, awesome. Next question. I noticed that with the new debug protocol, when you hover over the node on breakpoint, its children are no longer listed like before. Any thoughts on that?
We are actively looking and solving this. Part of this was to one of the topics earlier about debugging tools. We would have to use the execute functionality of the debug protocol, which prior to recent firmware releases has been quite slow, 1 command per second. This has been dramatically increased, and we are revisiting this along with other potential options for restoring this functionality.
I believe we actually have a pull request that is mostly complete. It's on my list to review that next week, actually. So this might land in the next week or two because I think we've solved it already. It just was a matter of the performance.
Okay, awesome. How do you balance adding new features to BrighterScript with maintaining compatibility with existing BrightScript code?
Yeah, so our goal has never been to make a whole different language and just leave Roku's language in the wind. As if we were going to do that, we would have just used TypeScript. The goal here was that you could incrementally upgrade your projects. And so all of the syntax that we're adding has been inspired by existing BrightScript code, or if there's not something in BrightScript, we would look to Visual Basic, which I believe is some of the inspiration for BrightScript. So we mostly try to add things that we think Roku, if we're going to add a feature, we try to add it in a way that would be palatable for Roku to add in a similar capability. Now, obviously, we're going to add features that we think are going to improve, and Roku may not add many of these features, but we at least give that a lot of consideration when we're adding it. Like if they were going to implement it, we have 2 ways of doing it. We'll pick the one that is closer to how we think they may add it in the future.
Okay,
I'll
awesome.
also say this is a very recurring topic over the many years we've worked together. We constantly go, all BrightScript code is valid BrighterScript code. So we never introduce a syntax that is not backwards or is not forwards compatible, I should say.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so we don't have a final question, but we've got just a couple of comments. You guys are brilliant. Thank you for the amazing work you donate to the community. And just wanted to say thank you. Lots of awesome improvements presented today. So with
Thank
that,
you so much.
I think
Can I say one more thing? I just want to
no, go
I just
ahead,
want
go
to say
ahead.
thank you to everybody for all the work that you've done in the community, and just one final call. We really need your help. There is so much to do, and I said that in my video. I'm going to say it again. There's a lot. There's documentation, there's coding, there's bug fixes, there's so much. Reach out to me if you're interested in helping in any capacity. I am happy to find anything that you might be interested in. I'm happy to make that work with the time that you can contribute. So just give it a thought, even if it's an hour a week. I mean, we'll take it. It'd be great. Thank you so much.
All right, any closing comments, Chris?
No, I think that's good. I got to keep him in line.
Okay, well, this has been awesome. Thank you for everyone who's joined us for our community tools panel. After this, we're going to be jumping into our ads panel. So we're going to take a very, very short break, 2-minute break, and we'll be right back.